presenting Real Estate in a Digitized World, a knowledge seminar by India Chapter of International Advertising Association.
Good evening or good afternoon. I'm sorry that I am the last speaker because I'm very conscious that at 5 to 6 I am now between you and your weekend or you and your glass of cold beer that's awaiting you. The good thing about this presentation, I hope, is that it's not going to take me 30 minutes to speak today. So please bear with me and let's just get into it. So by way of introduction, I'm Zia. I am a principal at Wolff Olins. I've been with the firm for over 10 or 12 years. I started my career in the New York office. I then moved to London, which is the headquarters of the firm, and most recently got seconded to help set up the Dubai office, which is the Asia hub for Wolff Olins. It's interesting to see a galaxy of stars perform today. I've learned a lot, and I'm honored to be a part of this gathering. And I'm doubly honored to be the only female here to make up for gender equality. Now, some of you might know the story of the blind man and the elephant. I believe it's an Indian story. One blind man touched the trunk of the elephant and thought it was a branch, and the other touched the tail and thought it was a snake. And the story goes on. In the spirit of the Indian story, this presentation is a Wolff Olins perspective, so please bear with me. It's a perspective that is based on our experience. Now, I am aware that many of you in the audience may not know Wolff Olins. Wolff Olins is a brand business, but you will have seen our work. So on the far left-hand corner, if most of you have a TV, I'm sure you saw the Olympics, and that was one of the high-profile brands that Wolff Olins created. If you have friends and families that live abroad, I'm sure you connect on Skype, which is one of our big clients, and on the back of that, we've just opened our 4th hub in San Francisco. For the women who use Dove for their skin, Wolff Olins created Hindustan Lever. And for people who love New York City, Wolff Olins has branded the unbrandable. 4 years ago, we decided to set up an office in Dubai, which, as you all know, is India's 3rd most important city. When we opened our doors in Dubai, that's when Lehman Brothers was shutting theirs. Not exactly brilliant timing, you would have thought, but actually it has worked out quite well. We believe at Wolff Olins that in the next 10 years, best brands will emerge from Asia, particularly from India. So the trick for us was to make sure that the Dubai office is a fully serviced office, and the team in Dubai are as good as the team we have in Mayfair or in Manhattan, and now even in Palo Alto. Wolff Olins has had modest success in India. You can tell I've spent a lot of time in London because only an English person would speak like this. At any given time, Wolff Olins has 2 high-profile clients in India. And the point is not to boast. The point of today is to share what Wolff Olins has learned. Wolff Olins has not worked in this sector in India. And by this sector, I mean property and place branding. But we have worked in and around this sector in other parts of the world. So the top row here are the real estate developments that Wolff Olins has worked in the United Kingdom and in the Middle East and in Canada. And then the bottom 2 rows are high-profile branding that Wolff Olins has done for places in the world. And then for high-profile tourist destination, as we've done a lot of work for the Tate Smithsonian and the V&A Museum in London. I'm sorry, my presentation about Wolff Olins isn't as eloquent as Barry's was, but I had to give you a little bit of introduction. So if today's conference is about real estate in the digitized world, my presentation comes to you in two parts. The first, some observations in real estate branding. The second, observations on how companies are using digital. Put it another way, I'm going to talk to you about two things today, the subject of choice and trust. Let's get on with the first bit of the presentation. I am now going to take you through two scenarios, and depending on how you view the market, will have an implication on how you treat your brand and therefore the role of digital. This is scenario one. In scenario one, it is a seller's market. More demand than can be met. I'm going to use an example from the Middle East so as not to cause any offense to the audience here. But I'm not being judgmental. I have seen the same thing in Moscow, in Hong Kong, in Shanghai, in Delhi, and every emerging, or as Harvard now calls it, fast growth markets. In a seller's market, the convention is to treat your brand, the developer, and the development as a logo. This is an example of Dubai. And that's fine, because in this market, you can sell off-plan. So the attitude that developers have with their customer is one of a transaction rather than a relationship, and that's fine. This is an extreme example in Abu Dhabi. This is a client of Wolff Olins's. Abu Dhabi, helped by oil, had a very, very large development plan. And because you're selling off plan, the emphasis was on impressing people, which is why the title of this slide says, Big, Bigger, Biggest. My client did not have any research. And when I asked the client, who is this plan for? He replied and said to me, Zia, the plan is targeted at everyone. Some developers also emphasize how tall and shiny and bright their towers are. Typically, this is done through some sort of 3D digital animation or visualization. For those of you who are familiar with Dubai, these pictures are taken right outside my house, which is the downtown area. And for the ladies in the room, this is right near Dubai Mall. In Dubai, invariably, developers use aspiration. This aspiration can vary from happy smiley faces, glamorous people in yachts, glamorous men driving Bentleys, and so forth. There is a whole series of this convention. This is a great thing, and it works, and it's cheap. On to scenario two, a buyer's market. A buyer's market where there is too much choice. This scenario is different. You are now operating in a tougher market, and by tougher market, I mean a tougher market environment, and this could be stricter government regulations down to discounted valuations. This also could mean that you now face tougher competition. As you, the developer, now want to move into new markets and want to become aggressive, you will face a new set of competitors. Those competitors will also be acting in different ways to defend and attack market share. This means that some of our clients who are operating in this scenario have have considered using a tougher brand, a brand that drives business, not a brand that is cosmetic wrapping. In this world, and I'm in scenario two, the developer's brand becomes a seal of quality, a promise. and the emphasis now shifts. You will still see development brands. And I've put an example of Howard Walden Estate, who's a very big landowner in London and owns my favorite high street, which is the Marylebone High Street. Howard Walden focuses on the end user. He thinks about me. When I had a flat in London, the things that went through my head in order to pick that flat was there going to be a Waitrose when I come back from work and I can buy groceries? Is there a Pizza Express or somewhere where I can have dinner with my friends? Was there a local pub where I could hang out? Was there some place where I could do my dry cleaning, my nails, my hair? Was there a bookshop? How close was my apartment to the bus, to the tube, so on and so forth? Howard Walden now influences shops on the high street. They think about me and my needs and my family. This scenario in the brand is less about aspiration and is more about life. What this means is that Howard Walden is going out of their way to ensure that there are additional services on that high street for me. This is usually informed by research. Push it further, and I will come back to this example. Websites now are also very smart, and we heard about this in the panel discussion. They carry relevant information that I can now access quickly on my Apple iPhone. In other words, in this scenario, the brand is less about towers. The brand is more about the people who live inside those towers. So if you are even thinking about changing your mindset from towers to people, in this scenario, the trick is to talk about life and not lifestyle and aspiration. So let me give you an example. Chiswick Park. This is something we did for them. Chiswick Park is a commercial development by Sir Stuart Lipton in the west of London. It's a development that's some miles out of the center, so it's not in a very attractive area. But Lipton has nonetheless managed to get a premium of £5 per foot. We worked with him and positioned the brand as a great place to live and work. Traditionally, an office park is a product, a set of buildings with some green grass around. Chiswick Park, in contrast, is a service. In fact, as the title of this slide says, it is a whole set of services designed to help 12,000 people to enjoy work. A large part of the community activities for Chiswick Park was set up on digital platforms. These websites are still active, and Chiswick Park is still doing really well, so I would encourage you to go check their website out. What is interesting is that working with clients in this scenario, we see that they see themselves as service businesses and not just a property developer. In short, the two scenarios are like a novel, A Tale of Two Cities, which you might have read. Dubai and London. In scenario one, you talk about claims. Brand is a logo. You talk about how biggest your towers are. You build the brand on aspiration, and you treat the customer as a transaction. In the second scenario, you talk about actions, about what you do. The focus is on being useful to the end customer. The developer's brand is the seal, a promise of quality. Instead of talking about biggest, you talk about being useful to the people who live in those towers. You use platforms like digital to create communities. Fundamentally, it is about creating a long-term relationship. So a question for all of you in the audience. If you think this is scenario 1 or scenario 2. Last week I was in Delhi airport, and as I passed through immigration in the international airport, to my right-hand side, I saw a little booth, the Raheja booth. And I'm not taking a swipe at Raheja, and I repeat, I'm not taking a swipe at Raheja. They are very close friends of mine. And on the right was an exhibition of a tower, and there was a really nice video. I've actually taken it on my iPhone, but digital always doesn't work, so I couldn't get it from my iPhone to my computer. So this morning, I went to the Apple App Store, and I downloaded the Raheja app, which is a screenshot you can see there. Raheja talks about towers, and so you can see pictures of towers. They describe themselves, and you can see how they describe themselves, and they have an icon on logo, not even brand. And when you click on that, it's an empty page that's saying logo is coming. Now, I have no doubt there are other people in this room who do similar things like this. From our point of view, as someone again said in the panel, if a property sells, then it sells, and then it's good practice. And there are no right or wrong answers. It all depends on how you view the market. And as I said, I'm not being judgmental. I'm just putting forward 2 scenarios. And the way you look at those 2 scenarios is how you're going to develop your brand, and that will determine the role of digital. On to the second part of the presentation. So if the first part talks about the supply side, the second part looks at it from my point of view as the individual customer. You know this better than I do, which is India is growing. So this is a slide from a chart from the McKinsey report of 2007, but that's not the point. The point is that we're currently at 200 million, and McKinsey says that by 2020, we'll be at 400 million. This means that there will be more people who will want to buy property. I recently bought a flat in Bombay. This is, without the doubt, as someone in the audience here said, the biggest transaction of my life up to date. It is certainly more expensive than going to Harvard. From the time you decide that you want that flat, to the time you actually get that flat and are having a cup of tea. So I've drawn a very simple chart here. So the first thing is when you get your flat, and the middle 2 circles are the pain and the grief an individual has to go through in order to be sitting on the couch to have that cup of tea. That middle bit is very, very, very painful. Whether it is London or Mumbai, the process is painful. I don't know which is less. In London, at least, real estate agents are the least trusted people. Often, they are the most junior people who know much less about the brand. During the pain moments, it's hard to know who to turn to for advice. The funny thing, as even Barry mentioned, is that we're more likely to believe total strangers on the internet rather than paid media. So back to the subject of trust, it is reasonable to assume that we are going to see much, much more of social media. In my experience working in India and with Indian clients, I can say that most Indian firms shy away from social media. But the thing is that people need to ensure that they trust the developer. Branding is no longer about hoardings and brochures. It is going to be about this stuff. Because as Jeff Bezos, who's the CEO of Amazon, says, your brand is what people say about you when you are not in the room. That said, linking my presentation to the next part of this talk, which is about digital, the thing is that there isn't one single right answer. I'm going to share with you 2 examples of two strong brands, both operating in scenario 2 and from the same developer. This is a screenshot of a website called hollandgreenwa.com. Holland Green is a group of 3 new apartment buildings designed by Rem Koolhaus's firm. This is a client of Wolff Olins', and it is going to be around the house of the new Design Museum in London. And the area is Holland Park. And by 2014, this development will be up and ready. It would have been very easy to talk only about towers and show pictures of Rem Koolhaus. Instead, Wolff Olins advised the clients to not only talk about those things, but also to talk about the services that were going to be offered. Each apartment is selling between 5 to 20 million pounds. Almost all of the 50 apartments have now been sold. Sir Stuart Lipton ensured that this website didn't have much information. Digital media has been used to only get people to get the name and the email address to then call the agent to get more information. It's kept very exclusive. And when all the digital medium and all the sophistication comes through is in the face-to-face interaction with the agent. Chiswick Park. He's used a lot of digital to build real communities. The whole brand that Wolff Olins created was a .com. This is the intranet site, and this was the whole branding around the intranet site. And it was an area where people across offices were sharing stories, tips, so on and so forth. In 2007, the Financial Times recognized Chiswick Park as one of the top 50 places to work in the UK. Now, there's a lot of stuff going on in terms of new tools in the US, as we saw earlier on. People are using YouTube and Google Maps. But even in India, there are interesting new tools coming out. This is one of the companies that I came across doing research on. And what they actually do is they tap into various government planning agencies and they connect the landscape digitally X years from now. Because one of the things that most of us think when we're buying property is that, will a motorway come here 5 years from now? Or I have a beautiful view, will it go? And so agencies like this are using tools to help people imagine what their property might look like 5, 10, 15 years out. So for many of you in the room, if branding was this or it meant advertising, I hope I've shown you that it can be a little bit more than that. Branding can change the way people think, feel, and act. And actions are important because that's ultimately money. For the marketeers in this room, if your CEO says this to you, which is, I'm not interested in awareness, brand attributes, or market share, I'm interested in profit, growth, and risk, and you've got a week. My advice to you would be that in the past, we used to think of branding as a project. It was linear. Increasingly, with tools in the digital world, branding is now a process. It is a circle. You can start wherever you want, but just make sure that you finish the loop. And as you go through the loop, be open to making changes. That's the beauty about digital. You can live in beta. Now, I'm not sure if this applies to India yet, but we are seeing this a lot with our international clients, and it may happen in India sooner than I think.
You mentioned that you have done the branding for New York City. So I just wanted to know that to brand a place like that, what are the factors that you would consider in actually creating a property out of city which has never been done before?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
To create a property like New York City, what were the factors that you considered which can actually be highlighted? Because whatever you would do is already there, and it's there as a part of knowledge for the people who stay there. So how is it that it is communicated to people that this is a new property and it can become a major attraction?
Oh, so New York City was actually a project that was done for the residents of New York City. So it was a brand created for New York City. And it was to brand the city of New York, not properties within New York City.
All I'm asking is that in terms of doing that branding for creating that destination, what were the factors that you considered which need to be highlighted?
Okay, so when you do any property branding projects, and I'm talking about place branding really, your major key stakeholders are government agencies. And government agencies are a bit more tricky working with them than you have when you work with the Tatas or Adanis of the world, because a CEO can make a decision, and that's a decision. But when you work with government agencies, there is a lot of persuasion and is a lot of consensus building, and so you have to wait quite a lot. It's the art of persuasion and influence. And so it takes much longer when you work on high-profile city brands such as New York City.